you. Who's next? Or are we not doing that?
Okay. So I'm going to talk about Sapling because everybody talks about Launchpad. I've played around it a little bit. We don't use that. So we've been using Sapling for a couple of years as a traditional homework system for our students. And so actually what I'm going to talk about today is kind of how I've implemented Sapling in the classroom instead of out of the classroom, and kind of a little bit more about my students. I'm at a large state university. Our total enrollment is about 30,000 students. And so the class I've used this most in, and it's going to be implemented more in the future in our other classes, but it's a general organic biochemistry survey course. These are pre-nursing students. If they get an A or B in this class, or they don't get into nursing school. So the stakes are pretty high, and they're a little high-strung. We meet 4 days a week for 50 minutes, mainly first-year students, although I do have a fair number of non-traditional students. We do have a full medical center on our campus. So we have people who are working at the hospital, come down for class, and go back to work. So we're getting a fair number of those. Usually between 200 to 250 per semester. That might go up a little bit as we move to our new building, as our enrollment increases, like everybody else, we get budget cuts, and so they're making up for that with increased tuition. So what I did was a couple of years, a year and a half ago, I can't remember now, we started doing small group work in class, which students were rebelling against, of course, because they actually had to work in class and actually, like, learn instead of me talking at them for 4 days a week when they said, oh, we learn better when you lecture 4 days a week. So, so I was a little anxious about trying to do active learning in a classroom that's not set up for active learning at all with this many students. So since it's a 4-day-a-week class, I have enough outside class content that they only come to class, each student only comes 3 days a week, so they split between Monday and Tuesday. I'm very excited that our new building, which we move into for the fall semester because there is no backup plan, whether it's done or not, we're moving into the new building and teaching there. We have 2 rows per tier in the auditorium-style classroom so that you can actually have better group work in there, so we're very excited about that. So I'll probably switch to just having group days on 1 day. So the way I did this with my students was the kind of asynchronous part that I had them do outside of class were videos I recorded, kind of preparing them for what we were going to cover in class. These are screenshots from an interactive lesson that they would do online. So it kind of models some of the stuff with Flip It, but it's not there yet for chemistry, so it's using kind of the same idea, but this is a separate tool, it's not for Macmillan. But so the videos are there, it's integrated. We use Canvas as our LMS, so it's integrated with that. I can see that they've done it, they get scored. They can repeat it and get perfect scores. Okay, they're like, can we watch it twice and improve our grade? Sure, because they can't jump ahead in the video and have to play through, and I'm sure some people have figured out a way to scam it, and you know, I'm not going to worry about those. But that way it stops them, and a lot of times the videos are just basic content to prepare them, some definitions, and the questions are sometimes like, I just said, for example, what is the solute, and you're going to tell me that right back now. So it's very simple. Sometimes we get into calculations. But I can also record working example problems. That's a big thing where my students struggle. My pre-nursing students, their math requirement is much lower than for our Gen Chem courses, and it shows. They're much more ambivalent about their math skills, regardless of their actual skills. But obviously, as all recipients of healthcare, we all want to make sure our healthcare providers can do basic dimensional analysis and calculations so that you get the right dose of medicine for you, of the right medication and all that good stuff. So we spend a lot of time dealing with calculations on this type of thing. So this kind of gets them ready for class, and we've been doing this along. And so what I used to do was I had a folder for each group. There would be 1 copy of the activity in the folder because I didn't want them having all their own copies, because what happens when you give everybody their own copy?
They work alone.
They work alone. Nobody works together. So so I was a little ambivalent about doing this with someone, but we had started with the paper copies at the beginning of the semester, and I've been doing this for a couple of semesters. But they couldn't check their answers in class unless they asked me. And when they left, since the class was split over Monday and Tuesday, on Tuesday I would post a blank copy in the key, but they didn't have it. They wouldn't get back their copy until the next week. So I was like, okay, I really want to push them to work together, but this is not working. So what I've done now is adapted Sapling. So the Sapling question banks are more traditional homework type questions to practice the skills. And so most of the content in there were the questions I built and content that I put in there as opposed to using existing questions. But the format was very similar because They see Sapling for all their homework assignments. It's all there. It's something they're used to seeing. They're entering answers the same way. It's very comfortable to them, so they can use that. So it was a very easy switch for them to bring it in class. So part of the active learning is there's the little models, little chunks of information that kind of supplement what they were doing in preparation for class. And I know you can't read this, that's not the point, but I try to use lots of images. You can see I'm a big image person, so I have screenshots instead of text as much as I can. But it kind of gives a very basic reminder of what they talked about in the prep videos. But where I found that Sapling was most useful was, what do you remember from those prep videos? So this was asking definitions of molarity and molality and mass percent and percent by volume, because there's a big difference in these numbers, and we want to make sure they know the difference, because if something says molarity and something says molality, those mean very different things. And so these questions we took advantage of the drag and drop. So using in Sapling, one of the powers is all the different ways we can ask questions. And for chemistry, we like fill in the blank, we like multiple choice, we like drag and drop, we like drawing molecules, we like it all. We want to write every kind of question you can possibly think of. We will come up with a way to use it. So this is a way to kind of help them practice. And I was really concerned that students would go back to this very independent, because now they all have it on their screen in front of them. And it turned out they did, and I think part of it was because we started the semester paper, so they got used to it. I assign them to groups. I don't let them pick their groups, and they're physically somewhat separated from other groups in the classroom, so they're not just a big mass of students. I won't be teaching Gen Chem 1 this year because of some administrative duties, but when I go back to teaching that, we'll be doing this in class, but I'll have to implement it a slightly different way than I do in my pre-nursing class. So we start with a model of information. We move to some basic recall definitions, so that first level of Bloom's, getting some recall. What definitions do you know? What do you not know? And then going on to some applications. And so these are some basic applications. And then the questions can build. So as this was one most of the questions from one activity, I can see very clearly after class, one, they figure out there's probably students who didn't even work there, didn't enroll in the class. So I can see how far they got, where they were struggling, and so I get a very quick picture at the end of class of what the problem was. And if you, for example, in the middle of class realize that you've written a question and you've marked the wrong answer as the correct answer, you can easily go back in the middle on the fly and change it, so that way the students can refresh the page and they can correct their answer. So when you start seeing red pop up, or when students start telling you. So that's one thing I really like about Sapling, is I can fix things on the fly, because especially for questions that are written by Sapling, they've been a little more vetted, but questions I wrote sometimes the day before because I was running late, those don't always get vetted and reviewed quite as much. So sometimes there will be a change I made right then and there, but I could do that in class because it was so easy and so quick, and all they had to do was refresh the screen, which was great. But this gave me that information right after class to see where are my students struggling. So Monday and Tuesday were these group days. I could see this, and then on Wednesday we can go back and say, okay, you know what, whatever we were talking about in question 13, we got lots of orange there, that's a problem. I can review that, I can post an extra video, I can do other practice problems with it, so it lets me quickly identify that. With the paper copies, I couldn't do that because, well, there were 80 groups, and I didn't have time reasonably to go back and do all that. But the goal of this is to walk them through from that very base knowledge. So the video is meant to give them a very brief introduction and overview, and then I introduce content kind of on an as-needed basis. And so what I have here is Model 1. So here's some definition questions, some practice. Model 2, we keep adding levels because there's additional content. So we kind of have to add it in chunks, because much like in math and other disciplines as well, but in math and chemistry especially, if you don't know Part A, you're kind of up that creek on Part B, because you can't. They depend on each other so heavily. And so you can build this content in and introduce new topics. So the model, they all get those questions right, because there's no questions, so they get a green bar or whatever. And I didn't actually get a grade on this part. I just said, as long as I see that you're going through it in class and you're getting green and you're doing it, I'm fine with that. So if you get answers wrong, it doesn't matter. They get multiple attempts so they can see right away that question 2 is wrong, so that way they can talk to their group, they can talk to me, because I basically do laps around the classroom. Their score for the day is actually based on their reef, so we used to use a different system. Well, most of the universities still have. We switched over to the reef system, so they answered the clicker questions asked in class. And so sometimes I'll pull direct questions out of this so I can get real time. Sometimes I'll take a related question and have them answer that in class. The big thing was, how does this work with the students? And so I did it one week. I said, you know what, I'm just going to try it. And one thing I really love about my pre-nursing students is they're really motivated because they're applying for nursing school at the end of the first year in college. They know they have to get a good grade in chemistry. The class is about 85% female, which I think really helps with, they ask questions, and it's all pre-nursing students. There's no diversity in that class academically, which is good because, I mean, you can apply the examples I use can all apply very specifically to the discipline. And so I did it one week. I said, I'm just going to try it. I said, how many people can bring their laptop to class? So I did have a few people that couldn't, and so they took paper copies, which was fine, and they just entered them later. And then I just did a quick survey in Canvas and said, tell me what you like. Most of them either preferred the electronic or they didn't care. They were like, paper, electronic, we don't really care. There were a few that liked the paper. They're very attached to the paper, and as an electronics girl, I don't get that, but that's fine. And for those students, I still would maintain a few copies if they really wanted it on paper. Some of them said they learned it better by writing it by hand. I'm like, well, you could still write it out by hand. You're just reading it off the screen and they're recording the answer. So even though I don't get that log. But the electronic version, and so it's kind of this active learning activity. They had their own copy. They had to submit an answer, and they got that immediate feedback where they were not getting that with the paper copies, because they're very motivated, but they're also very underconfident sometimes that they've got an answer right. And so they were like, I don't know if I did one right. I don't know. It's like, it's okay. Sometimes there's like, they go, what's the right answer? I'm like, well, there isn't a right answer. There are many right answers to this particular question. It's about, well, what are the trends you see? So there could be different things. And they like seeing it after class. And because the way Sapling is set up, I could control access. I divided them to basically two subsections, so the Monday students and the Tuesday students, so they couldn't see it until they got to class, because I did not want them doing it on their own and then just peppering their neighbor with the answers and then not getting that collaboration. I wanted them in the room. I wanted them collaborating on it so that they could discuss it. So this past semester, I started this about midway through and I want to get finished adapting those activities because I have them written on paper. I just need to kind of implement them in there and create additional activities. The colleague and I basically took the approach of, we're done lecturing. We're done. We're not. We do 3 and 3, and we spend so much time teaching the students who are not paying attention. And so our goal is, when we're getting this nice new fancy building with these nice classrooms set up for active learning, and so our goal is to fully implement this. We are not calling it a flipped classroom. We are calling it active learning, because if we call it flipped, people freak out or they flip out for not so good reason. Sorry for the bad pun. But the perceptions of, when you call it a flipped class, the perception of what that means varies so much, even within disciplines, about what that means, and across disciplines it's even greater. And students have heard this term, and students have seen some really bad implementations of a flipped classroom. And their initial response when you say we're flipping this, they just go, I don't learn this way, which is really the only way they do learn. Me talking to them doesn't teach them anything. So we are talking about active learning classrooms is the way we're selling it. And we're also coming up with, basically, we're trying to come up with quotes and things we can put, because one of the big struggles we see with students when we've done this in little bits in our classes is selling it to students, of getting them to understand that it's like when you teach, when do you really learn material? When you teach it the first time. And so that's the way, when students are going to learn it, is when they're doing it. And so we need to get them, so we're trying to sell it to them better as an ongoing part of our teaching, that, okay, here's how, whether it be quotes or we're still brainstorming those ideas. We got till the end of August. We're good. Because they just don't, and so I'm going to create additional activities. And I've got to go back and redo some of the videos, because I've used some videos that were from other sources. Students do not like that. They want your videos. They want your voice or your face, even if they're not perfect, and mine are nowhere near that. Done is better than perfect. But they like seeing you, because it's talking about their test and their class and their content and those students. And even if you mess up, it's okay. But, so that's kind of my goal of where I'm going from here. But it's just kind of an ongoing process. But that's kind of the rest of my summer, is recording videos. Because I use an ebook that's an open source content, And so it's very learning outcome specific because those students also tend to want a lot more hand-holding with, I want a study guide, and I don't do study guides, and I don't do an outline, but I give you learning outcomes, so they have that full list of learning outcomes. So my goal is to break down the videos more to kind of pair my videos with specific learning outcomes a little better and kind of a little bit more organization of that. But that's probably the biggest challenge of all this content is how you deliver it all to students. And so with Canvas and Sapling integration with Canvas, I can kind of, here's this to go here, and so it kind of all comes together in one place. And that's what I'm doing.